Networking tools. Throughout some of the lessons, we've talked about networks and the different components and equipment that's on a network. And up to this point, we've not really talked about or covered some of the tools that you would need while working on a network, specifically cabled networks. So, in this lesson, we're going to talk about some of the tools that you'll need as a technician and setting up networks or maintaining and providing maintenance on some of these networks. So, in an infrastructure, cabled or Cat5 infrastructure or Cat6, when you have cabling, you're going to need to be able to put either an RJ45 modular connector onto the end of those cables. Cables are generally pulled to locations that they're to be installed, but it's pulled without the modular ends. And you put the modular ends after the fact, once the cable is in place. And a crimper is a tool that is used to put those modular ends onto the cable. Now, a crimper crimps or squeezes the connector onto the wire. Typically, this is for a twisted pair or your Cat5 or Cat6 wire. However, there are crimpers for coaxial and fiber as well. So again, it's used to put a modular RJ45 onto a network cable. And also there's crimpers that can do RJ11s, which is your telephone wire. And how a crimper works is the modular plug is inserted into the crimper, and the cable is paired into the cable pairs are separated, and it's put into the modular connector. And the pairs, once inserted, the crimper crimps the connector onto the cable. Now, in a later lesson, we're going to talk about specifics as far as the cabling codes and so forth like that. But generally, in a crimper, when you're going to put those pairs into the insert into the modular and plug, and it's going to go into the crimper, and the crimper crimps and squeezes that connector onto to the cable. And this is done at both ends. Very effective tool to have a crimper. Actually, it's an essential tool, especially when you're laying cables in a network. Another tool that you will find quite handy is a toner probe. You should never work in an environment without a toner probe because it helps you find and locate wires, saves you lots of time finding wires. And how a toner probe works is there's two pieces to a toner probe. There is the probe itself that listens, and there's the tone generator. Now, on that tone generator, it normally has several different connection types that have either alligator clips or like an RJ45 or an RJ11 plug to plug into a data jack. So on one end, the tone generator would be the source. You plug that into either to a jack or you clip it onto the wires, and you turn the tone on. And the probe listens for that tone, and you can hear it through the amplified speaker. Then you go to the other end where you're looking for that cable, and you run that probe through the wires, and you'll hear that tone that you heard on the originating side come through that speaker, and it helps you locate wires. I've used this many times, saves a tremendous amount of time locating wires. And you don't even have to touch the probe to the wire because it will pick it up and come through the speaker on that probe. Punch down tool, another invaluable tool to have. Now, a punch down tool attaches or punches wire onto a 66 or 110 wiring block. So on the back of a patch panel, you'll have the Cat5 coming into the network closet. And on the back of that patch panel, you'll see different places where those wires are actually punched down according to the color code that you're going to use. And this is the tools that you use to attach it to the back of that patch panel. So you separate your pairs and you line them up according to the color codes that are going to go on. And you'll notice that on the punch down tool, there is a blade, and that blade is held a certain way. So it cuts off, it punches down and cuts off the wire simultaneously onto the back of that patch panel. So it trims the wire as it punches it down. There's two different ends. There's a 110 and a 60 that used for a 110 block and a 66 block. Also, you can use it for your data jacks when you're running your cable to your jacks, your data jacks. Same concept. You run the wires through the data jack according to the color code that you're wiring, and you punch it down onto those little terminals inside the data jack. You have to watch the direction of the blade because if you turn that blade the wrong way, it will punch it down and cut it, and you'll have a cut wire within the jack. Cable testers. Cable testers are another invaluable tool. Cable testers basically are connectivity tests. It tests your wires after you've punched them down to make sure that you have the proper connection. It can detect missing or crossed pairs. If you're punched down, if you punched a wire down and didn't punch it correctly, it will show as an open connection. So it can validate the wire mapping within the wire to make sure you got your pairs correct. Now, there are more advanced cable testers that does frequency, signal loss, length calculations, etc. But a cable tester is just the basic test of the cable to make sure that the pairs are correct on both ends. Wi-Fi analyzer. Wi-Fi signals in a network can be very loud sometimes. Our wireless networks are loud because all the devices in that network can see the signals from other wireless devices. So you have a lot of traffic going on. And you'll never see this traffic until you turn on and view the screen of a wireless analyzer. So it's best to use for as a site survey tool to find out what's the best channel to broadcast on, or what's the best frequency sometimes. Because again, there's so much different wireless competition going on in that area. Sometimes you can use these for the best antenna location. So it's a very invaluable tool for when you're setting up wireless networks. Now, wireless or Wi-Fi analyzers are very accessible now because not only could it be a dedicated device that you would bring onto the location, you can have use a Wi-Fi analyzer that's built in some radio devices, has a built-in Wi-Fi analyzer, as well as mobile apps and software. So, very accessible software and apps to use for your Wi Fi analyzation and very straightforward to use. You'll see the different frequencies being broadcast, the different channels, and based on their intensity level, you can make a decision of what frequency would be best for that location that you're installing that wireless connection in. A loopback plug. A great way to test your device or your ports to find out if you're not getting a connection to see if it's the port or the device. A loopback plug basically is a modular plug that's looped back on itself, and again, it mimics a connection to a port. You can use this loopback plugs for Ethernet, fiber, serial T1s, and it validate the interface or the device. Taps and port mirrors. So a tap is a unique device where it works in line of a connection to test the traffic. So a network tap connects directly to the cabling infrastructure to split or copy the packets for use in analysis, or in a general network maintenance mode. In physical networks, a network tap is typically deployed in a network link connection between two interfaces of the two network elements, such as a switch and router or other devices. And it's treated as part of the network. So, although the firm tap predates the networking industry by decades, the IT industry has generally accepted the term to mean a test access point. So again, that device sits in between the two devices that you want to monitor and check, and it captures those packets, and you can plug another device into one of the other available ports. Now, taps are could be active or passive. There are two different types. You can have a passive where it does not require a power source, or you can have an active tap where it requires a power source. And you can use this on a variety of cable types and speeds, network speeds. Now, port mirror along the same lines, but works a different way. Port mirroring is implemented in a local area network or a LAN, or even in wireless networks, or even in a virtual environment. And it monitors and troubleshoot network abnormalities. Now, this is configured on the network switch by a system administrator or an admin. And generally, a port is configured to mirror the traffic coming from one port that you want to check the traffic on. So, when enabled, that traffic that emerges to and from the specific port is automatically copied and transmitted to a monitoring destination port. So typically, that destination port is part of a monitoring software or security application that you want to monitor that traffic. And the port mirroring process is generally hidden from the source. So the source and anyone on the network doesn't really know that you're monitoring that port. So, in summary, we talked about networking tools that you need to be aware of and that you may find yourself using as you're monitoring and managing networks. We talked about the Cripper, we talked about the toner probe, the punch down tool, cable tester, the Wi Fi analyzer, loopback plug, and the network tap. Okay, great. Thank you for being a part of this lesson, and we will see you in the next lesson.